Good day. Welcome. My name is Dr. Nand Bardwell. I'm the manager of the Diplomatic Academy of the Caribbean, the professional development training arm of the UWI's Institute of International Relations based here at the UWI's St. Augustine campus. I'm delighted to welcome you to the inaugural edition of a new initiative we have here at the Diplomatic Academy of the Caribbean called In Conversation with the DAOC. The topic of today's program is the United Nations Security Council bid for a non-permanent seat, that is, of the Bahamas. The Bahamas recently announced that it would launch a campaign to secure a seat on the United Nations Security Council as a non-permanent member. So today we're going to be exploring that theme, but I want to begin, before I introduce my guests for the day, with a brief contextual overview. So, at the general debate of the 79th session of the UN General Assembly, Caribbean community leaders, among them the Prime Minister of Barbados, Mia Mottley, emphasized the need to, quote, ensure that global institutions give developing countries, especially small, vulnerable ones, like my own, seats at the tables of decision-making, where we can be seen, heard, become active agents in our own cause, and lead our own development paradigms, end quote. In this regard, they have a special interest in the United Nations Security Council and its reform. It's noteworthy that in January 2024, Guyana joined the United Nations Security Council for the third time as an elected member for a 2-year period. St. Vincent and the Grenadines set a record as the smallest ever UN Security Council seat holder, serving in that capacity from 2020 to 2021. Jamaica served as a non-permanent Security Council member for the second time over for the period 2000 to 2001. For its part, Trinidad and Tobago was a non-permanent United Nations Security Council member from 1985 to 1986. So, amid one of the most turbulent moments in the transition from the unipolar moment to multipolarity, wherein mounting great power competition is placing key tenets of the UN Charter under greater threat, the Bahamas announced its bid to serve as a non-permanent UNSC member for the 2032 to 2033 period. The country's foreign minister, Frederick Mitchell, delivered a statement to this effect in the Bahamian Parliament, informing that the relevant election would take place in 2031 and that his country has the support of other CARICOM countries. According to Foreign Minister Mitchell's government, the Bahamas' candidacy for the Security Council is guided by the themes of resilience, relationships, and representation. The government views this candidacy as an opportunity to amplify these crucial messages and contribute meaningfully to the UN's vital work in promoting peace, security, and sustainable development for all. Evoking the power of multilateralism, the government sees a connection between its over 50-year independence journey to date and its UNSC candidacy within the larger context of smaller nations' ability to contribute significantly to global progress. Against this backdrop, and going back to the theme for today's program, which is the Bahamas' bid for a non-permanent seat on the United Nations Security Council, it is indeed my honor and privilege to welcome on my right the Director General of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Bahamas, Ambassador Jarissa Ali. And to my left, I will also want to take the opportunity to acknowledge and introduce to you the Acting Director of the Institute of International Relations, Dr. Anita Montoute. We're going to be hearing from both in the context of the subject matter of today's program. So, against that wider backdrop, Ambassador Ali, again, we're very privileged to have you on our program today. What has prompted the Bahamas' bid for a non-permanent seat on the United Nations Security Council at this time? And in responding, Madam Director General, could you provide a little bit more information and connect that answer back to Bahamas's national interest and how this particular bid at this particular time connects to the Bahamas's national interest and core tenets of Bahamas's foreign policy?
Thank you for having me. As part of this diplomatic dialogue, we feel very welcomed. And there is no perfect time to launch a bid. But this bid was very well considered. This bid will breach several administrations. The vote for this particular candidature takes place in 2031. We've given ourselves a long period. I would describe the period that we're in now as a listening period. We've set out our objectives and our aid memoir, which we've circulated to the states with which we hold diplomatic relations and others. But we are here now to listen, to learn, and to make sure that we can address some of the critical reform issues of the Security Council. We're a small island developing state. For us, we strongly believe in a climate security nexus. This is something that during Ireland's time on the Security Council, they would have worked with Niger on supporting a UN security resolution on that climate security nexus. But I don't think that all UN member states recognize the importance or the significance of that relationship between climate and security. And we recognize climate change as a root cause of insecurity, and that's our message. By the time insecurity becomes so detrimental to a population in a state or in many states, we already know that there's been a climate insecurity. We know what's happened in the Sahel with desertification. We know what's happened in our region with climate, with natural hazards and hurricanes, water shortages, border disputes, motivated by climate. It's important to capture that. So I think that is probably our greatest motivation right now. Our Prime Minister always tells us in the Foreign Service, your number one issue for foreign policy is climate change. So that's our charge. It's a climate diplomacy charge. Also, as part of this bid, I actually brought a printed copy of our aid memoir because I don't know if I can show our audience. Well, we can certainly show this.
For sure, we will on our website.
We have a logo, which we designed based on a Bahamian folk artist named Amos Ferguson, and he captures our spirit as a people. But he's also someone that we can talk about his life and his journey. He was from Cat Island. He used recycled materials, cardboard. He was a house painter, and he did many paintings about what is peace. So we're going to use, we've worked with his family. We're going to use his images to represent our campaign.
Thank you very much for that. You mentioned this aid memoir. I'm wondering whether, for the benefit of our audience, you could unpack this document, speak a little bit about the document itself, and speak to the three prongs that I imagine help inform it.
Right.
Yeah.
So we have a broad overarching theme, which is resilience, relationships, and representation, and that's very much about climate change, climate action, and our ability to be resilient, the need to build relationships, to stop the sort of deadlock that we've seen with the Security Council over the past year, especially, and representation, and that's about SIDS representation. So one of our main objectives is to demonstrate SIDS leadership. We've seen our Jamaica, Guyana, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and there are other small island states, Malta and so on. We're actually very important because we are neutral. We are, our history is different than the P5. Our understanding of conflict is different than the P5. Our ability to advocate for victims is different than the P5. So we really think that SIDS leadership on the council is something that we need now, and we hope we will have in the future. Agenda setting is very important. We saw that with Guyana. I remember earlier in the year, there was a really important special session on food security. In the Caribbean, and we believe in food security and food sovereignty. When you don't have that, that can also be a root cause of violence. So we need to make sure that our issues are on the agenda. Our peace and security issues are on the agenda. For the Bahamas, Haiti is an important peace and security issue that needs to remain on the agenda. We really do believe in Security Council reform. We are not sure what that looks like because there are so many proposals. We are part of L69. We're not in the same world, the post World War II world. It's not the same world. And we need decisions to be made by a diverse body to improve those prospects for peace and security. We will emphasize that climate change is a security issue. And I think that some states are coming around to that understanding, especially through other multilateral conferences like COP29, UNFCCC. People are beginning to discuss climate also as a security issue, but we'll be more forceful in bringing that forward. We also think it's important to have a human rights grounding to peace and security discussions. This year, we are getting ready. We're excited to open the first regional office of the High Commission for Human Rights in the Bahamas. And we really look forward to working with OHCR in country on human rights issues in the region, and focusing a lot on climate and on peace and security. And we have to remind the rest of the world, we don't have to remind anyone in the Caribbean, but we are a zone of peace. And we take that very, very seriously. And all we want to do is expand that. We want to explain what that means to us, how we've worked hard to maintain that, how we continue to work hard to maintain that. I can think of earlier this year, we all met in the Argyle Airport in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, because regional leaders were insistent that despite the challenges between Guyana and Venezuela, we would remain a zone of peace.
Thank you very much for that. I want to turn to our acting director now to provide some perspective on this very important moment. But before I do, and since you did underscore this point, I think again, for the benefit of our audience, climate-related issues loom large. And as the Director General indicated, for the Bahamas, no less. For Prime Minister Davis, and I want to quote here, the link between climate change and global security is undeniable, end quote. Further, in Nassau's determination, a seat for the Bahamas at the Security Council table would lend itself to better positioning that body to, quote, deal with the biggest crisis of our time, end quote. This sentiment could not be more apt, taking stock of the stark terms with which the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, frames the imperative of taking action on climate change. This is at a juncture in which others point to climate change as the, quote, defining issue of our time, end quote. So I want to turn to you now, Madam Director. So again, for the benefit of our audience, Dr. Montoute is the acting director of the Institute of International Relations, a decades-old institution within the UWI system, offering postgraduate education at the nexus of the Caribbean and international relations. What to you, Dr. Montoute, is the significance of the Bahamas' bid for a seat on the United Nations Security Council in this very moment? I ask that of you against the backdrop where the region's political directorate, as recently as the United Nations General Assembly General Debate, indicated their dissatisfaction with a liberal international order that was birthed in the wake of World War II, that has for decades served the interests of its principal architects at the time, of course, Western nations. And there's a growing impatience in the region for the superstructure, the architecture of that liberal international order to catch up to the interests of a now growing and emerging global South, a global South that arguably has come into its own. These signals were sent recently and have been over the last several years. What, against that wider backdrop, to your mind, Dr. Montoute, is the wider significance of Bahamas' bid for this UN Security Council non-permanent seat at this time? And if you could couch your reflections in the context of the wider small island developing states, small states narrative, and their ability to punch above their weight in having a seat at these very tables that make decisions that are at the heart of international politics.
Thank you, Dr. Badwell, and I want to join Dr. Badwell in welcoming Ambassador Ali, and we are very privileged and very honored that you are here, and we are very pleased to be associated with the Bahamas and the bid for that non-permanent seat in the UN Security Council. As I've said before in our earlier discussions, we in the Caribbean, we may not have the military might or even the economic capacity as big powers, but what we have intellectual capacity. We are intellectual giants, and we have seen it in various spheres in the international fora and global fora, how Caribbean states, by virtue of our well-qualified personnel, we have shared ideas on the international landscape that have made marks and shifts. And so I see this as an opportunity for what has been done in the past and the legacy that we have before us to be emphasized, to be deepened. And I know that we have promoted ideas, and we will continue to with that with what you have explained to us, that the bid of the Bahamas and the success, we are confident that will be successful, that will add to what we have already demonstrated in other spheres. So we are very pleased that the Institute of International Relations and the Diplomatic Academy, we are part of that, and we are happy to support and to promote and work along with the government of the Bahamas and the region to stand behind and your bid for that seat. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for those reflections. As we wind down, I want to provide you with some additional space to touch on a couple of developments. Of course, in recent weeks, speaking about, you so eloquently described and made a link between the Bahamas's bid and hopeful seat on the United Nations Security Council in years to come to SIDS, a group of which the Bahamas is integrally a part. I want you to reflect about a development in recent weeks, and that is the United States having backed the idea of a SIDS seat on the United Nations Security Council. This to my mind at least, is an important win, given the fact that the United States, as everyone is aware, is part of the P5 grouping within the wider 15-member state grouping that is the United Nations Security Council configuration. So to what extent does that represent a win? And I asked for you to reflect on that recent development against a backdrop of a changing of the guard in recent days in respect of the United States soon to be installed administration. What can you look forward to, given the Bahamas' role in the L69 in respect of a new administration coming into office in the United States, what that may mean for these very delicate issues, renegotiations around UNSC reform, this win being an important one, but perhaps members of our audience thinking about the extent to which that can carry forward in this new political environment. So a tough question, I'm sure, but one that I think needs to be asked at this time.
States are having a moment. That's small island developing states. We are geographically desperate. I think a lot of persons imagine SIDS as just in the Caribbean, but they're throughout the world, mainly in the Caribbean and the Pacific. I just came back from Commonwealth Heads of Government, which was hosted by Samoa. And I had the opportunity to travel to Samoa, but also stop in Fiji. And immediately, when you're in another SIDS environment, it's a common discourse, it's a common understanding of development, it's a common understanding of security. So we simply need to stay together and make sure that P5 understand our perspective, understand who we are. Administrations will change. We have not changed. Our physical environment defines us so much. It defines us politically, economically, culturally, and otherwise. So it's our role and responsibility to explain who we are, why we're different, what we offer, and ensure that we're part of that conversation. And sometimes that conversation is held bilaterally with a member of the P5. Other times it's a smaller regional grouping like CARICOM, or perhaps it's AOSIS. Sometimes it's a formal dialogue, like we are going to have, is it next week or the week after, we'll have CARICOM India as a formal dialogue, and we'll probably discuss some matters of peace and security in that formal setting. We also have informal settings. But I'm quite confident that we have so many SIDS that are leaders in their own right. We saw that with Antigua and Barbuda hosting SIDS 4. My prime minister has just returned from COP29, and people look to him as a SIDS leader. They want to understand his perspective, our perspective. It's important. It was part of the agenda at COP29, and it will continue to be part of that dialogue with P5 who care about climate and who care about our circumstances. I'm actually confident. Perhaps I'm too confident or idealistic, especially as a government official. I should have a little doubt sometimes, but we do have such a strong connection with other SIDS, and we help each other. We've started this campaign, and we've had other SIDS tell us, not only will we support you and vote for you, but we'll help you with your campaign, and we'll share how we developed our campaign in every aspect. It could be in lobbying strategies. It could be in how many officers they've posted to their New York UN mission. It could be in allowing us a voice at the table, in kind of with non-traditional partners and in non-traditional settings. We can always lobby our fellow like-minded states in G77 and NAM, but we can also expand that to Pacific Forum, to ASEAN, because we all have shared interests.
Thank you. I think I'd like you perhaps to reflect on any number of statements that the Director General has made thus far, Dr. Montut. Anything that comes to mind that you would like to share with us?
Thank you, Dr. Bardwell. I think now is the time, as you were speaking, Director General, now is the time to begin or to continue to think about changing even broader narratives, meta narratives about our existence. Because I think for very long we thought of ourselves only as small and vulnerable, and we thought about ourselves in terms of physical size. But I know there has been some discussions about our size, not only in terms of our geographical space, but also the fact that we have oceans around us as large ocean states. And we want to add, I think we need to begin to add other things that define our capacity, our intellectual capacity and our human resource capacity, and not to be confined by the categorizations that have been placed upon us, our economic size in terms of our GDP and our physical size, but also about the other things. And I think that is going to be very important when we have that ingrained in our psyche and we start promoting this from secondary schools, and it permeates through adulthood and through tertiary educational institutions and through the foreign service. And so I think we would begin, well, I think it was already beginning, because we are already seeing the strength that we have and the leverage that we have as we speak on those issues that we have authority to speak about. And so what is already happening, I think it's an additional opportunity to bring all of this together and change the bigger story and the bigger narrative about who we are and our capabilities. So I'm happy that this is going to add to it and to really shift, to cause a paradigm shift and a fundamental shift to how we view ourselves and the impact that we are having and will have further on the global landscape and in various other areas of our existence.
Thank you. Actually, speaking about the bigger picture, a question that comes to mind, certainly for me, and I'd like to get your reflections on this. The extent to which you are invested in this run now for a non-permanent seat on the UNSC, to what extent in your thinking, in your administration's thinking, is the idea of UNSC reform and what you can bring to that agenda, what you have been, along with the Caribbean community countries, bringing for years now? Caribbean community has had long-standing interest in and has had agency in talks around UNSC reform for several years. To what extent can you provide some reflections on the degree to which the UNSC or reform of that body can serve as a catalyst, speaking about bigger picture, but in a different context, can serve as a catalyst for needed change that our own political directorate has pointed to regarding the international order writ large, its institutions, the way in which this international system does business, so that ultimately our interests, whether it be on climate or any other number of issues, are properly served. In other words, for those institutions to become fit for purpose, not just the interests of conventional powers, but also the interests of us as Global South countries. So if you could make that connection, the extent to which you feel, in the context of your bid, you could contribute to what I think is an emerging narrative, that is reform of the United Nations Security Council serving as a catalyst for that wider change.
Right. Well, we're discussing structural reform of an institution in a multilateral organization. And even the discussion of that is a story, is a narrative, is a dialogue that can bring about change in norms. So on one level, we're here to get elected. We're here to lobby. We're here to get elected. We're here to agenda set. On another level, we're here to tell stories. We're here to make this campaign a Bahamian campaign. So we've just finished Diplomatic Week. For the first time, we held Diplomatic Week in what we call Family Island. We are actually 700 islands, 3,000 atolls and keys. We're 128,000 square miles of ocean. And we want the dialogue about UN Security Council reform to be held everywhere throughout the country, so that we can tell the story. And I think we're really excited about that. We have 7 years. We've just started. There's quite a bit of excitement and interest. We're certainly going to do school visits. We're going to make sure that we have what our permanent secretary is calling Family Island diplomacy. And I'm excited about that.
So this bid is a vehicle for other things.
It is.
As well.
It is.
Okay, I'd like to wind down now, and I think it would be remiss of me not to quickly circle back to a point I made earlier in the opening, and that is that according to your foreign minister, Bahamas has the backing, of course, of the wider Caribbean community region. I just want you to expand a little bit about the nature of that support, how you see that support playing out in service of this very important but complex bid. This is the first time you've made a run, the Bahamas has made a run for this particular seat. Some of our member states, including Guyana, is now three turns in. Now another, for the third time, a serving UNSC member, albeit in a non-permanent seat. So give us some insight into the support that you've obviously clinched from the Caribbean community, what that support looks like going forward as you seek to advance your bid next steps.
Well, our support from CARICOM, it's formal, it's formalized in our negotiations at the head of state, head of government, and foreign minister level. But it means more than just the vote. CARICOM supports us because we support CARICOM. So every time you see a CARICOM member state win a successful bid at the UN Security Council, it's a win for all of CARICOM.
Mm-hmm. I think that's an excellent way to put it. And again, just for the benefit of some of our audience, speaking about institutions within the Caribbean community system, using its lexicon, there's something called the COFCOR, or the Council for Foreign and Community Relations. And that body plays a very important role, amongst other things, in respect of the coordination of foreign policy. So just to press you a little bit further, what is it you can expect that coordination role of council in the context of the advance of your bid down the road? As you said, several years removed now, but of course the work is in front of you.
Right. So COFCOR is a very important body for agenda setting for CARICOM's foreign policy. And we can bring issues of importance for every member state to that body. But the other mechanism where we engage CARICOM, and I think it's kind of underexplored, or in academia at least, is that we have a CARICOM caucus in most major capitals, and an especially strong caucus in UN, New York, and Geneva. So when you come closer to a particular vote for a candidature, that's really where the dialogue and discussion and support and lobbying ramps up. It's like having, hands supporting you to the finish line. All of the permanent representatives meet on a regular basis, and they help each other.
Thank you. I'd just like to give the floor to the director as we round out. She did indicate in her earlier remarks that, of course, we are happy to lend support to this very important moment in Bahamas's foreign policy history, and I would dare say in the context of your independence journey thus far. Director, I'm wondering if you wish to expound a little more on the nature of our partnership going forward with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. We have just recently had an internal talk about an online event. I'm wondering if you want to take the opportunity to expand on that and in broad strokes speak to when it is we've penciled it in for and what we can expect in terms of that event going forward.
Thanks, Chair. So I'm happy that we have been partnering with the government of the Bahamas. We had a training recently with for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and we are very pleased in our earlier discussions that on January 30th, we will be hosting a webinar where we'll be highlighting that particular bit of the Bahamas and be rallying and sharing what it is, what it means, so that we could get the region and of course outside on board with what is happening. And, we are looking forward to formalizing also our relationship. It's very tentative. We have to consult further on this. And we hope to deepen, strengthen, and continue to support and to make this partnership richer than it already is. So having said that, I just want to thank Dr. Badwill for his leadership on those areas, and just thank you to you and your government and your delegation for your presence and your continued partnership with us.
Thank you very much. So, audience, you've just received a preview by way of this brief engagement in conversation with the Diplomatic Academy of the Caribbean on a wider dialogue we intend on having at the ending of January 2025 to draw additional attention to this very important Bahamian bid for a non-permanent seat on the United Nations Security Council. So you've gotten a sneak peek as to some of the issues that we're going to be expounding on in greater detail by way of what will be a panel-driven webinar ending January of 2025. Again, I want to end by thanking my two guests, of course, Ambassador Jerissa Ali, Director General of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in the Bahamas. Thank you very much for your time and for your perspective. And I also want to take the opportunity to thank our acting director here at the Institute of International Relations for her perspectives in the context of our program today. So with that, we'll bid you adieu. Thank you very much.